Chapter 70. The first thing that Xianxia did was to launch the yin and yang 5 elements secret art and put his own spirit power to the maximum. The spirit power of the underground spiritual vein was constantly replenishing Xianxia's meridians. The gentle spirit power made Xianxia not worry about having too much spirit power and having the idea of suppression. When the spirit power was mobilized to the maximum, Xianxia launched the secret art to the sword case a few steps away from him. The sheathed sword hanging on the wall seemed to be attracted by Xianxia and slowly flew away from the wall and floated to a place more than 10 feet away from Xianxia, suspended in the air, and began to rotate slowly. All of this seemed easy, but Xianxia did not dare to relax. The correct secret art was the only hope that Xianxia could successfully collect it. Xianxia even suspected that since he could find the jade slip that recorded the secret art in the Qingquan bag of this predecessor, how could the first Jiedon stage master in his previous life not find it? Perhaps when he saw the sword case, he subconsciously started to collect it and was killed by the backlash. However, Xianxia would never make that mistake in this life. The secret art was very complicated, there were at least 200 continuous movements, and he could not make a mistake. With every movement, there would be a spirit power injected into the sword case, and at the same time, Xianxia's spiritual awareness would also be injected into it, slowly replacing the original spiritual awareness. Xianxia's current realm was low, so he could only use this kind of slow work like boiling a frog in warm water to slowly wear down the spiritual awareness of the predecessor on the original sword case, and then put his own spiritual awareness imprint on it, making this magic weapon his own. Every time he injected the spirit power into the sword case, it almost consumed all of Xianxia's energy. If it weren't for the continuous replenishment of the underground spiritual vein, and Xianxia swallowed a qi replenishing pill almost every time he shot out a spirit power, maybe Xianxia could only hold on for a dozen times and would be consumed by the sword case due to the lack of spirit power. Every time spiritual energy entered the scabbard, it would flash once. Every time, Xianxia would contain all 10 kinds of spiritual power, and every time, the sword sheath would flash a 5-colored light. In the small cave, a colorless light began to flicker incessantly, as if the sword box had become a glowing object. Xianxia's movements were neither too fast nor too slow, maintaining a fixed speed. The interval in between was just enough for him to recover all his spiritual power, and then he could use it again. Under Xianxia's precise control, this had become a constant cycle. The yin-yang 5 elemental art was unprecedentedly efficient. It was as if the spiritual power would be completely replenished in every breath, and then in the next breath, all the spiritual power would pour out again. The meridians of the whole body, under such circumstances, completed the changes of waxing and waning, and at the same time, slowly tempered the meridians themselves. Blessed by the heavens, there were not only sufficient spiritual veins, but also enough qi replenishing pills, and at the same time, there was also the crazy yin-yang 5 elemental art. When Xianxia finally consumed close to 1,000 qi replenishing pills, the spiritual power in his body was fully replenished and exhausted 1,000 times. The meridians of the whole body shook and suddenly expanded. His body seemed to have opened a lock, and the original spiritual power restriction disappeared in an instant. Xianxia's heart moved, and he directly controlled the purified bottle underground, slightly slowing down the absorption speed, so that the black jade futon could get more spiritual power to replenish. The experience of his previous life told Xianxia that this was a sign of entering the second level of qi training. The advancement of the realm was not simply the improvement of spiritual power, but also the upper limit of the spiritual power that the meridians of the body could hold, as well as their own understanding of the various laws. Xianxia had no problem with the latter, but the limit of the body, even if Xianxia's body had been tempered by the flesh and blood of countless immortals, he could only break through step by step. After entering the realm of the second level of qi training, not only did the yin-yang 5 elemental art circulate faster, but the speed of replenishing spiritual power, and the upper limit of the spiritual power of the whole body, also increased crazily. In addition to timely adjusting the spiritual power provided by the underground spiritual veins, Xianxia also added more spiritual power to the collection method. The effect seemed to be very obvious. The light emitted by the sword sheath became brighter and brighter, and the speed of the rotation began to slowly slow down. At the same time, the distance between it and Yang Chen was slowly shrinking. Finally, after consuming more than 1,000 qi replenishing pills, the sheathed long sword quietly stopped in Yang Chen's hand. All the light, after a violent flash, completely disappeared. And in Yang Chen's spiritual sense, there was also a feeling of flesh and blood, as if he could completely control the sheathed long sword in front of him. After stopping all the movements, he replenished his spiritual power, stood up with a happy face, and slowly stroked the scabbard with his hands as if he was touching his lover. With the sword sheath in hand, Yang Chen found that this sword sheath had many magical uses. This sword sheath itself was not only a flying sword, but also a container which could hold thousands of flying swords. The shape of the sword sheath could also change according to the owner's mind. The original owner liked the appearance of the sheathed long sword, so now it was the appearance of the sheathed long sword. But what Yang Chen liked now was obviously not like this. Under Yang Chen's gentle touch, the appearance of the sheathed long sword began to slowly change. Soon, it became the appearance of the peerless fierce blade that Yang Chen used on the beheading immortal platform. Very skillfully waving the beheading immortal blade, Yang Chen showed a happy smile on his face. This sword sheath was not just a simple flying sword and sword sheath. The most important thing was that it could integrate the power of the flying sword in the sword sheath as the sword soul and turn it into its own attack power. The sword soul could be one or more, but it must be fully controlled by Yang Chen. Even the sword sheath itself could refine several sword formations when it was refining. When it launched an attack, it was directly the power of the sword formation composed of the sword soul. Now in the sword sheath, there were at least a dozen flying swords with various attributes, but the quality was very general. Refining the flying sword magic weapon was not so easy. Even the previous Jedon stage master could not have such a big deal and put hundreds of flying swords in it. But for Yang Chen, it was not a problem at all. When he killed the immortals, many people said that they left flying sword magic weapons in the mortal world. As long as he found them one by one, he could fill them all into the sword sheath. However, the sword soul was not easy to find. With Yang Chen's current knowledge, since he had obtained this unique sword sheath, of course, it was impossible to find a few flying swords casually. At least, Yang Chen's sword soul must be the best of the best. Of course, it was too early to consider this. Yang Chen stroked the sword sheath in the shape of a ghost head blade, but in his heart, he wanted to sharpen the edge of this beheading immortal blade first. The best way to sharpen the immortal beheading blade of the heavenly court's executioner was to cut off people's heads. Chapter 71. The 5 killers outside were still searching anxiously. It was impossible for a junior at the first level of Qi refining to disappear without a trace all of a sudden. It was not that there was no good thing in this world that could cover up the breath of the whole body, but it was by no means something that a little guy at the first level of Qi refining could use. Yang Chen was still waiting for a suitable opportunity. At least, he had to wait until these people couldn't find him and were impatient. The gap between the two sides was too big, whether it was the number of people or the realm. If it was a head-on confrontation, Yang Chen was definitely not their opponent. He had just entered the second level of Qi refining, and he also got such a good sword case. Yang Chen was really happy in his heart. What made him most happy was that he intercepted a powerful magic weapon from the master of Bright Moon Palace who betrayed his master in advance, so that he would not have the capital to be so arrogant in the future. In addition, Yang Chen did not intend to leave this underground spiritual vein. He needed to wait for the purified bottle to completely absorb the spiritual power. First, the growth of medicinal materials in the purified bottle medicine garden required a lot of spiritual power. Second, it was because of the factional disputes. This place was located at the edge of Meiqing Mountain, and it was also the place where Chunyang Palace's control was the weakest. Not far ahead was the sphere of influence of another sect. There was no lack of disputes caused by robbing resources in the cultivation world. Even in Yang Chen's previous life, after Chunyang Palace collected the magic weapon, they still had to negotiate with the neighboring sect and left the underground spiritual vein to the other party. Since this cave was now temporarily owned by Yang Chen planned to take all the things inside, including this underground spiritual vein. It was better to keep it for himself than to give it to other sections. The purified bottle opened and absorbed the spiritual power crazily. Usually, the purified bottle could suck up the spiritual power within 100 miles. It was absolutely no problem to concentrate it at the exit of the underground spiritual vein. Although Yang Chen was still unable to refine the magic weapon, the universe treasure-raising secret art could be used anytime and anywhere. Moreover, the old lord also said that this universe treasure-raising secret art had no limit on the number of times. In short, the higher the cultivation, the more times it was used, the better the grade of the magic weapon. There was nothing else to do now, so it was just right to use it to raise the treasure. There was still half a year to go before the 20th of July. Yang Chen did not have to rush, so he had plenty of time to waste. Anyway, the Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art only needed to be practiced once a day. The rest of the time, in addition to the 3 purities secret art, it was the universe treasure-raising secret art. For a whole month, Yang Chen hid safely in the illusion array of the senior, recuperating and building up his strength. As for the 5 killers outside, they were almost going crazy. There's no trace of this junior anywhere else. He must still be here. The long-bearded scholar had already contacted his distant friends through paper cranes, confirming that Yang Chen had not appeared elsewhere. We can't wait like this any longer. But we can't find him. What should we do? Because the black-clothed man had failed to track down Ji he had been thoroughly blamed. Even he didn't know what the problem was, so he could only obediently listen to the long-bearded scholar's instructions. Now that the scholar had said so, he immediately said what he wanted. Find the person in Chunyang Palace and ask him to find a way for us. The long-bearded scholar snorted coldly and finally couldn't bear it anymore. We can't find him, but can they in Chunyang Palace not find him themselves? Which sect doesn't have a tracking array on their Qingkuan bag? Ask him to find the person and tell us. What if he goes back on his word about the price? The black-clothed man asked immediately. He still has the nerve to raise the price. He's just a junior at the first level of qi refining. Unless someone gives him something good to protect him, how can he get rid of our tracking? His own information is wrong, and he still dares to argue with us on the price? The long-bearded scholar's face became ferocious. If he dares to say anything more, it's not a big deal for us to break up. We'll expose the fact that he killed his fellow disciples. Let's see who is afraid, us or him. At this time, no one said anything. The person who was responsible for negotiating this deal left quickly and went to find the client in Chunyang Palace. The rest were still carefully searching around. Even if they couldn't find him, they couldn't let Yang Chen escape. The spiritual power of the underground spiritual vein was unscrupulously extracted by the purified bottle, and it was finally exhausted. In the purified bottle, there was no longer a trace of blue water stain at the beginning. It had become a section of almost 4 or 5 centimeters high. This spiritual power was enough for the medicinal materials in the medicine garden to be used for hundreds of years or even longer. Satisfied with the purified bottle, Yang Chen walked out of the cave with a satisfied expression. After thinking about it carefully, he jumped up and directly collapsed the mountain wall above the cave entrance. In a short while, the falling soil and stones sealed the cave entrance tightly, and no shadow of the cave entrance could be seen anymore. He believed that after a few decades, when someone broke into this illusion array, they would only find an empty flat ground. They would never find the tomb of the predecessor in the cave. He believed that the predecessor would never want future generations to constantly disturb his long sleep. Of course, Yang Chen did not have to be afraid that someone would know that he had obtained the legacy of the predecessor. Finally, after taking a look here and seeing that there were no flaws, Yang Chen held the murderous blade in his hand and began to slowly walk out of the illusion array. His luck was really good. When Yang Chen just walked out of the illusion array, he found that there was a guy not far away who was releasing his spiritual awareness to search for himself. Looking at Yang Chen, who suddenly appeared on the spot, the other party seemed to be unable to believe it. He was stunned, and unable to make any movement. This was a great opportunity. Yang Chen's killing intent penetrated his body and went straight to the other party. At the same time, his body rushed over like an arrow. The murderous blade in his hand was waved high and slashed at the other party. Although the murderous blade was Yang Chen's own magic weapon, Yang Chen currently did not have the strength to use the murderous blade flying sword to kill people. Magic weapons could only be used as weapons. Even so, a magic weapon was still a magic weapon. In terms of pure sharpness, it was enough to cut off the head of anyone below the foundation establishment stage. After being stabbed by Yang Chen's killing intent, the originally very surprised enemy fell into a momentary daze. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough for Yang Chen to rush over and swing his blade. With a cracking sound, the other party's 6 young chiefs' head flew up high. Blood fiercely rushed out from the neck. The headless corpse even made a few movements, and then, accompanied by the sound of blood spurting out from the neck, it fell to the ground. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. You and I have no grievances in the past, and there are no grudges between us. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for accepting the mission to kill me. Yang Chen put the murderous blade behind him and said to the corpse that had fallen to the ground. Then he raised his head and looked in one direction, then turned around and rushed in the direction of the illusion array. Chapter 72. As soon as something happened to the person on this side, the long-bearded scholar, who was searching within 10 miles, immediately noticed the movement here. His figure flashed and immediately disappeared. In the blink of an eye, his figure appeared hundreds of feet away. In just a few flashes, he appeared next to the corpse of his companion. The scholar came over very quickly, but the other companion was faster than him. After Yang Chen killed the person and said those words, he directly turned his head and flew towards the location of the illusion formation without looking back. His figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. The guy who followed him only saw the disappearing figure of Yang Chen. However, this glance also confirmed the location of Yang Chen's hiding place. The entrance of the illusion formation was originally only less than a foot in radius. The 5 people searched this place and just scanned it with their divine sense. It was impossible to find it. Yang Chen's figure flashed and disappeared. When he saw the assassin's figure, he immediately appeared in that position. When the middle-aged scholar rushed over, he also only saw his companion make a gesture to him and immediately disappear from that place. The long-bearded scholar's cultivation was the highest, and his mind was also the most meticulous. He clearly saw his companion's gesture and knew that he found Yang Chen's figure and went in to kill him. Now the most afraid thing was that he couldn't find Yang Chen's trace. As long as he could find him, he didn't have to worry about killing him. Thinking about it, an experienced 7th-layer Qi refining killer should be able to kill a 1st-layer Qi refining junior, right? Seeing that his companion had already chased in, the long-bearded scholar's face suddenly changed. There was still a companion's corpse lying under his feet. How could he be so careless? Since people disappeared as soon as they went there, it must be an illusion formation. Yang Chen could come and go freely in the illusion formation, and he also escaped the intensive search of the 5 people and killed a companion. Then wouldn't the companion who rashly entered the illusion formation be in danger? As if to confirm the scholar's thoughts, he saw a bloody head appear out of thin air as soon as he had this thought. It seemed to have been thrown high up and flew several feet in his direction. With a thud, it landed on the ground and rolled a few times. Its eyes were wide open, and its face was full of shock. This scene sent chills down the long-bearded scholar's spine. Who would have thought that 2 of the assassins, 4 of whom were in the 7th layer and 1 of whom was in the 8th layer, would be killed in the span of a few breaths when they were chasing a 1st-layer Qi refining outer sect disciple? Although the other party was using the illusion array as a cover, it was still too shocking. The second comrade who was killed still had a 3-yang magic robe on him. It was a practitioner weapon that had been refined by a foundation establishment expert. Although it was not at the level of a magic treasure, it was already an extremely strong defensive magic robe for those below the foundation establishment realm. Yet, it could not withstand the opponent's attack in such a short period of time. What kind of weapon did Yang Chen use? Flying sword? Impossible. If a person in the first layer of Qi training could use a flying sword, then all the Qi training cultivators in the world should just bang their heads against the wall and die. Even among the experts of the foundation establishment stage, how many of them could guarantee that they would definitely have a flying sword? It was a flying sword, not a talisman sword. Aside from the outstanding disciples of the big sects, who would be rewarded with a flying sword by their masters, how heaven-defying would a normal disciple have to be able to obtain a flying sword? Yang Chen must have an extremely powerful weapon in his hands. It could very well be a top-grade practitioner weapon or even a talisman treasure. After a short period of shock, this was the first thought that came to the long-bearded scholar's mind. If he killed Yang Chen, he would be able to get his talisman treasure. When he thought of this, the long-bearded scholar suddenly had a kind of expectation. He even eagerly hoped that Yang Chen would recklessly rush out and rush in front of him. The black-clothed man also appeared here in time, but he was far away and came even later. When he rushed over, he only saw the headless corpse of his companion and the two heads on the ground, as well as the long-bearded scholar standing not far from the corpse. Seeing this, the black-clothed man wanted to say something, but in the end he only opened his mouth and no words came out. "Junior, come out, I want to dismember your body into 10,000 pieces." The long-bearded scholar quietly waited for a moment, and after there was no movement, he finally broke out. At the same time, both of his hands flicked, a series of golden lights flashed, and attacked the place where Yang Chen disappeared. There was an illusory array, but it was an illusory array set up by a Jedon master. How could it be shaken by the attack of a trivial Qi training disciple? The golden lights shone very brightly, but all the attacks were like clay oxen entering the sea. There was no ripple. The black-clothed man vigilantly rose into the air, slowly approached the top of the illusory array, and looked down from above. He was a smart person, the opponent's strength was low, a disciple of the first layer of Qi training definitely did not have the ability to fly. And looking at the situation of the two heads on the ground, it was obvious that they were killed after someone got close to them. In other words, as long as he was in the air, he was already in an invincible position. When the long-bearded scholar saw the black-clothed man's action, he also understood the key point, and his body also flew up, but he still stayed in the same place, not too close. There was no movement at the illusory array, but neither of them dared to relax their vigilance, both staring at the area as if they were facing a great enemy. In their hands, they had already prepared the strongest attack power of the talisman weapon, waiting for Yang Chen to appear and immediately strike like thunder. Suddenly, the edge of the illusory array flashed, and a figure suddenly appeared. It was Yang Chen. The black-clothed man was overjoyed, and just as he was about to launch an attack, the scene in front of him suddenly changed, and he was in the middle of a round domed hall. The black-clothed man was stunned, and immediately realized that he had fallen into a formation. He didn't expect that this Yang Chen actually had a good cultivation in formations, but he didn't think that Yang Chen would have any powerful killing formations other than the illusory array. He took 2 steps forward, and only heard a series of whooshing sounds above his head. Before he could react, the 49 flying swords had already dismembered his body. Looking at the protective formation of the Xianxia mountain herb garden enveloping the black-clothed man, Yang Chen felt it was a pity. The long-bearded scholar was too far away, and there was no way to get him in. When the long-bearded scholar saw Yang Chen's figure appear, he was about to say something, but then he heard a series of crashing sounds, and pieces of flesh and blood fell from the sky. Pale with fright, the long-bearded scholar was about to escape, but he found that Yang Chen was just standing in the same place, motionless. The scholar instantly understood the key point. Yang Chen must have used some kind of secret technique to kill a 7th-layer Qi training stage cultivator, and he must have paid a price. While he was thinking, Yang Chen spat out a mouthful of blood, and now was the best time to kill Yang Chen. "What else do you have to say now?" The long-bearded scholar almost grinned. "I will give you a chance to speak." "Really?" Yang Chen suddenly grinned, and he didn't even bother to wipe the blood on his lips. "Then I will speak." "Speak, I am all ears." The long-bearded scholar slowly approached, and sneered again and again. "Every injustice has its perpetrator, Every debt has its debtor. Chapter 73. Just as he said Yang Chen's catchphrase, the long-bearded scholar's side suddenly exploded with at least 100 pyroblast talismans. The explosion caused by a single pyroblast talisman might not be able to injure the scholar, but the sudden explosion of hundreds of pyroblast talismans, especially those that had been strengthened by the universe treasure-raising art, was naturally different. When he killed the first guy, Yang Chen knew that these guys would definitely be lingering around the corpse, so he quickly inserted hundreds of talismans into the surrounding ground. Under the influence of his divine sense, they would immediately explode. Just now, he had forcibly used his whole body's spiritual power to barely move out the medicine garden's protective formation. He hadn't even used it yet, but it had already injured Yang Chen. But the other side unexpectedly miscalculated and gave Yang Chen time to speak, so that Yang Chen didn't have to escape back into the maze. A qi-nourishing pill that had already been in his mouth was promptly swallowed, and then he frantically activated the pyroblast talismans that had already been laid out. In addition to the pyroblast talismans, there were also dozens of 15-ton talismans and dozens of giant wood talismans. Wood feeds fire, and the power of the pyroblast talismans increased to another level. At the same time, dozens of thick giant wood suddenly appeared in the air and fiercely crashed into the long-bearded scholar. In the blink of an eye, the long-bearded scholar's whole body was buried in a pile of fire and giant wood, and no trace of him could be seen. Yang Chen held the fierce knife in his hand horizontally, and just as he was about to rush forward, he suddenly heard a wild roar. In the midst of the fire and giant wood, a huge, long, hairy claw suddenly appeared. The surrounding flames were forced back by the momentum of this claw, and unexpectedly, a path without fire appeared. However, the fire was stopped, but a few giant wood solidly smashed into the huge claw. Immediately, the owner of the claw let out a loud roar. Then, a shadow like a leopard flew out of the fire and directly pounced on Yang Chen. Yang Chen's knife was already horizontally in front of his chest, and when he saw this, he shouted loudly. He raised the fierce knife in his hand high above his head, and with a simple, splitting Mount Hua, he fiercely chopped down at the leopard that was pouncing over. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the man and the beast had shrunk to less than 10 feet. However, Yang Chen's saber momentum was extremely fast. From raising it to chopping down, it took almost no time at all. There was only a bright and beautiful saber light flashing in the air, and nothing else could be seen. One of the leopard's giant claws was about to touch Yang Chen's body, but it seemed to have suddenly lost all its strength. The huge body stopped in the air, and then it turned into two pieces in front of Yang Chen, separated from the left and right, and the incision was as smooth as a mirror. Yang Chen's gaze was no longer on the giant leopard. He stretched out his left hand, and dozens of pyroblast talismans and giant wood talismans were detonated in his hand. He attacked the place that was still covered by the flames. Amidst the violent explosions and collisions, a leisurely voice suddenly sounded, "Good saber. I want it." Then, the long-bearded scholar's figure suddenly appeared outside the flames. He didn't look the slightest bit embarrassed, and he still had that elegant appearance. Hearing this voice and seeing the figure, Yang Chen's body shook fiercely. It was as if he had become stupid. The fierce knife in his hand flew towards the scholar subconsciously. He actually threw it out of his hand, wanting to use the flying knife to hurt someone. Yang Chen's embarrassed appearance fell into the long-bearded scholar's eyes. He smiled slightly, and Yang Chen's knife flew in front of him. The long-bearded scholar just stretched out his hand very elegantly, and the fierce knife was in his hand. As soon as it was in his hand, the long-bearded scholar immediately felt that the fierce knife was different. He suddenly shouted, "Magic treasure?" His voice was full of surprise, as if he had suddenly won a huge prize of hundreds of millions. Before, he had always coveted the weapon in Yang Chen's hand that could easily kill his 3 companions. He even suspected that it was a treasure talisman. After seeing Yang Chen kill his spirit pet with his own eyes, he confirmed that the fierce knife in Yang Chen's hand was the treasure talisman he had always wanted. So, he didn't think about it and reached out to take it. He didn't expect that the knife was actually a magic treasure. Once he thought that a magic treasure would immediately become his, the long-bearded scholar was so happy that he almost fainted. A Qi training level 1 guy didn't know what was good, but that didn't mean he didn't know what was good. However, as soon as he discovered that it was a magic treasure, the knife in his hand suddenly released a fierce sword intent, as if it was going to bite him. Magic treasure. Immediately after, his voice changed. He still shouted the same thing, but the meaning behind it was completely different. This time, his voice was full of fear and shock. If it was a normal magic treasure, the flying sword, with his Qi training level 8 cultivation, he might have been able to take it. If a Qi training level 1 guy could hold it unscathed, then it must be a magic treasure that hadn't been refined. This kind of magic treasure, he was confident that he could hold it in his hand. However, he didn't expect that this magic treasure was actually so tyrannical. As soon as the long-bearded scholar felt something was wrong, he immediately wanted to shake off the fierce knife in his hand, but it was already too late. The surging sword intent directly rushed into his body, straight to the center of his divine sense. Qi, the scholar's body was like a hedgehog, innumerable sharp shadows appeared crazily. In a flash the scholar's body was full of holes, turning him into a big ladle. Then, his whole body seemed to have no bones, softly paralyzed, like a puddle of mud. If you really have the cultivation of a gold core master, then I'll admit it. Xianxia slowly walked forward, bent down to pick up the fierce knife that was inserted into the ground, put it into the merit ring, and shook his head at the meat paste on the ground. Unfortunately, you don't have it. From the beginning, Xianxia didn't plan to rely on his own talisman to repel the enemy. The talisman made by the Qi training level 1, even if it was strengthened by the heaven and earth treasure-raising secret art, using hundreds of them, it was impossible to cause any harm to the Qi training level 8 experts. So many talisman exploded, all to cover this last blow of the flying knife. Xianxia was stunned, throwing the knife to hurt people was already planned. His trump card was this murderous saber. In his previous life, this magic treasure caused Chunyang Palace to lose a gold core master. He didn't know how to refine it with the long-bearded scholar's cultivation level of the Qi training level 8, forcibly taking the fierce knife, other than death, there was no other possibility. There should be another enemy, but with Xianxia's divine sense, he actually couldn't find the other party's whereabouts. Moreover, the battle was so fierce, the momentum of the flame explosion talisman was so great, but the other party unexpectedly didn't appear, presumably he was not here. Xianxia no longer cared about anything else, began to slowly collect his spoils of war. Except for the long-bearded scholar, the others did not leave a complete corpse. To the enemy, Xianxia naturally had no need to be polite. The 4 intact Qianquan bags naturally became Xianxia's personal belongings. Chapter 74. 3 7th layer Qi condensation and 1 8th layer Qi condensation expert were pursuing him. No matter how good-natured Xianxia was, he couldn't help but be enraged. This matter was definitely Sun Haijing and Chu Heng's idea. Otherwise, Sun Haijing wouldn't have said those words before Xianxia left. But with Sun Haijing's wealth, he probably wouldn't be able to hire these experts. This matter wasn't over yet. In his previous life, Xianxia had been pursued before, but it wasn't when he was at this realm. The pursuit not long ago had made him feel the feeling of a stray dog from his previous life. Because fellow disciples couldn't kill each other, Xianxia hadn't acted against Sun Haijing in 9 Earth Villa. Yet, the other party was so relentless. It seemed that after he returned, he would definitely kill Sun Haijing on the day of the sect competition to vent the hatred in his heart. Continuously being pursued without retaliating was definitely not the attitude Xianxia intended to adopt in this life. To be able to hire a 7th or 8th layer Qi condensation expert, ordinary spirit stones were impossible. Unless there was a talisman treasure suitable for them, or perhaps a talisman treasure tailor-made. What Xianxia needed to do now was to find these things in the Qianquan pouches left behind by these people. Perhaps he could find traces of Chu Heng's methods from these things. Even if he couldn't find them, Xianxia still had to spread the news. As a cultivation imparting disciple, Chu Heng had always been at odds with Yang Chen. This was an open secret between 9 Earth Villa and Yi Xiu Villa. The rumors would cause him to be badly battered for a period of time. Instead, hire assassins to kill? Yang Chen hadn't thought about it. Since he'd started over and even the Jade Emperor had become a ghost under his blade, no matter what kind of enemy Yang Chen wanted to kill with his own hands, just like these people he'd just killed. Yang Chen tossed the corpses of these people into the maze. In such a short amount of time, he didn't have to worry about anyone discovering them. If things continued as they were, it would be decades before these corpses were discovered. Under the cover of the maze, it took Yang Chen almost 10 days to recover from the physical backlash caused by using the medicine garden's protection array. Fortunately, the purification bottle absorbed enough spiritual power this time. Fortunately, Yang Chen's spiritual power was not destroyed. But even so, with Yang Chen's spiritual awareness in the middle stage of the foundation stage, his spiritual awareness was still injured due to forcibly stimulating the array. Fortunately, Yang Chen had already collected the medicine garden. Even if he suffered a backlash, it would not be fatal. He just lost a part of his spiritual awareness. The 3 Purities secret art was amazing. In just a few days, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness was repaired. When he reappeared, he was in the Qiankuan Pavilion in Qiankuan Mountain. This was the shop of the Pure Yang Palace. Yang Chen walked in and others saw the Pure Yang Palace mark on the Qiankuan bag on his waist. No one stopped him and let him go to the lobby. A cotton bag was thrown heavily on the table by Yang Chen. The frost on his face made Yang Chen look a little fierce. He deliberately exuded a little murderous aura, which made Yang Chen look aggressive. If he was not obviously a disciple of Chunyang Palace, maybe someone would have thrown him out. Junior brother Yang, what is this? A fat shopkeeper appeared quietly in front of Yang Chen. Since he was one of them, of course, the shopkeeper had to come out to receive him. The shopkeeper was also in the 6th layer of qi refining, but he used to be a servant. After reaching the 5th layer of qi refining, he could choose to go out and take charge of the business for the sect. He had always been very respectful to these disciples who were allowed to go out to gain experience in Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen had been here last time. As the shopkeeper, he naturally recognized it. I was chased by several people. This is their head. Yang Chen directly opened the cloth bag, revealing 3.5 heads and several rune weapons that looked good at first glance. The reason why there were 3.5 heads was that the guy who was minced by the sword formation could not find a whole head. Only half of it was found, but the identity could still be vaguely seen from the remaining half head. These things were found from them. It is very similar to the method of Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen sneered. When did the people in Chunyang Palace collude with outsiders to kill the disciples of our sect? The shopkeeper was shocked when he heard this. Yang Chen was ambushed by a killer before he entered Jurong Mountain Villa. This incident directly caused almost all the individual cultivators around Meiqing Mountain to be interrogated. The last incident was just yesterday. Today, Yang Chen was chased again, and the disciples of Chunyang Palace were involved. For the shopkeeper, this was simply a bolt from the blue. The shopkeeper identified the heads of several people and immediately recognized them. They were several famous individual cultivators. They formed a group and often appeared in the marketplace. However, their cultivation was very good. Yang Chen was only a disciple at the first hurdle of Lianqi realm, but he actually killed the other party. This made the shopkeeper shocked, but he also admired Yang Chen. There should be one more of these guys. Go find his whereabouts. Maybe we can know who did it. Yang Chen reminded him, then he got up and left. I still have a task. Senior brother, please deal with this matter. I don't want every disciple of Chunyang Palace to be chased before they leave Meiqing Mountain when they go out to gain experience. Not to mention that Yang Chen left. When the news spread back to Chunyang Palace, everyone was furious. The disciples of the law enforcement hall came out in full force and once again set off an earth-shaking investigation around Meiqing Mountain. Sun Haijing, who got the news, was in a panic. Finally, he couldn't hold back the fear in his heart. In the name of seeking advice, he came to Chu Heng again. Master, what should we do? If we are found by the law enforcement hall, we will all be finished. Sun Haijing almost cried as he said this. It was a big crime to kill a fellow disciple. Once it was known, the consequences would be unimaginable. Why are you panicking? Chu Heng was also a little scared, but he didn't show up directly after all. He first made a gesture to seal the surroundings and then asked, "Did you give the search array to the guy who is still alive?" "Yes, master." Sun Haijing was afraid of this. Once the guy who was still alive was found, he would immediately die without a burial place. "Don't be afraid. I also left a tracking array on that magic array." Chu Heng stood up and calmly tidied up his clothes. "He will not live past tomorrow's sunrise. You go back first. If others ask you, just say that you don't know anything." "Yes, master." Sun Haijing was relieved when he heard that Chu Heng had other arrangements. He returned to his small courtyard and immediately began to do closed-door training, ignoring the things outside. When Sun Haijing went far away, Chu Heng flashed out of the door. Looking at the direction where Sun Haijing disappeared, he scolded in his heart, "Useless. You can't even do such a small thing and I have to do it. If it weren't for the obvious traces of killing you, I would have killed you long ago." After scolding, his figure flashed away. Chapter 75. Chu Heng was now faced with a very awkward and dangerous situation. If he could not get rid of the guy who came to ask for the array in time, he would have to face the punishment of murdering his fellow sect members once the disciples of the law enforcement hall found him first. Even if he was an inner sect disciple who had built his foundation and Yang Chen was just an outer sect disciple, the sect rules were the rules and would not change because of their cultivation. Moreover, Du Qian had always admired Yang Chen. Even the guys from the law enforcement hall had a strong sense of approval for Yang Chen, who was an executioner. Once they found out that he was the mastermind, he was afraid that he could only admit his guilt and escape from the sect. What angered Chu Heng the most was that a small outer sect disciple, and a first-level qi refining one at that. If it were in other sects, even the others in the sect would not be qualified to go out. Not to mention fighting with people in this realm, at most he could only learn to draw some talisman paper. Even the lowest level of spells needed to be at the second level of the qi refining stage to learn. How did Yang Chen defeat several senior killers? Could it be that a disciple in the foundation establishment stage was involved? Du Qian and Yang Chen had always had a good relationship. Could it be that Du Qian had appeared? It was not that Chu Heng did not suspect this, but if Du Qian had appeared, it would not have been Yang Chen who carried his head to Xianxia Pavilion. It should have been the disciples of the law enforcement hall who came to find him. However, to make Chu Heng believe that Yang Chen did it alone, he would never believe it. Just by relying on Yang Chen? A guy who only cultivated for 2 hours a day, at most 2 qi cycles, and spent his free time in the sutra depository reading jade slips. He was a guy who did not do proper work. If it was about alchemy, Chu Heng might believe it. But if it was about fighting, Chu Heng would not believe it. One person could defeat 10 people? It was possible to defeat a third-level qi refining disciple like Sun Haijing, but to defeat an opponent who was 6 or 7 levels lower than him by relying on strength, especially when surrounded by them, Chu Heng would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. The only explanation was that Yang Chen had someone helping him, and this was the reason why Chu Heng was fearless. According to this logic, Yang Chen's motive for joining Chunyang Palace was not pure. Unfortunately, he couldn't kill Yang Chen, nor did he get any evidence of his impure motives. Chu Heng could only kill the killer from Midsummer first. Otherwise, before he could catch Yang Chen's weakness, he would be in trouble. The news naturally spread back to the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, causing the outer sect disciples of the villa to all become confident. The disciples of Chunyang Palace who were in the first level of the qi refining realm could actually kill a few individual cultivators who were in the 7th or 8th level of the qi refining realm. If this was not the superiority of the sect, then what was it? Everyone seemed to be more excited than usual. Shenda and the other 3 were even more abnormally excited. The greater Yang Chen's reputation was, the higher their status would be in the future. As long as they were loyal, Yang Chen would definitely support them. Compared to the confidence of the other disciples, Chen De and the other three had a deep understanding of their own strength. Yang Chen killing a 7th or 8th level Qi refining assassin was because of Yang Chen's cultivation. It had nothing to do with them. The only one who was terrified was probably Sun Haijing. Right now, he practically couldn't eat and couldn't sleep at night. He lived in great fear all day. If he could choose again, he definitely wouldn't have said those sarcastic words before Yang Chen left. Other people might think it was an exaggeration, but Sun Haijing was very clear that those guys really did have a cultivation of the 7th or 8th level. Moreover, Yang Chen definitely didn't have anyone to help him. After Martial Uncle Du Qian left the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, he returned to Chunyang Palace and never left. Chu Heng had been keeping an eye on this, so there shouldn't be any mistakes. Yang Chen really did kill those 4 assassins by himself. 3 of them were at the 7th level and 1 was at the 8th level. Even if Sun Haijing himself had worked extremely hard during this period of time, his cultivation was only at the 4th level. Even if he counted the talisman weapons and talisman treasures that Chu Heng rewarded him, Sun Haijing might still have the confidence to fight against a 5th level Qi refining. If it was a 6th level Qi refining, he might have a 10 to 20% chance. He didn't even dare to think about the 7th level Qi refining. But Yang Chen actually killed 3 of them at the 7th level and 1 at the 8th level. Based on Sun Haijing's understanding of those guys, it was very likely that they attacked together. Even so, they were still killed by Yang Chen. Then, on the day of the sect competition, even if Yang Chen didn't buy any talisman weapons or talisman treasures, it would still be enough to kill him. Right now, he was practically counting the number of days he had left with his fingers. Waiting for death. For Sun Haijing, who had just joined Chunyang Palace a few years ago and thought that his future would be limitless because he had the thick thighs of Chu Heng's disciple, it was worse than death. Every time he thought about how he was possessed and how he made things difficult for Yang Chen when he entered the sect, Sun Haijing's whole body trembled silently, as if he also regretted the choice he had made at that time. Yang Chen was no longer worried about whether those guys had accomplices or not. He believed that Chu Heng would look forward to those people's deaths more than Yang Chen. Anyway, he had already reported the matter to the law enforcement hall of Chunyang Palace. If those guys' accomplices still dared to appear instead of running for their lives, he would really be convinced by these people. Now, Yang Chen could finally leisurely ride the paper crane made by the black-clothed man and fly peacefully. He believed that after the news spread, no one would dare to chase after him again. Yang Chen just threw a few heads at Xianxia Pavilion, but it caused a big earthquake within the scope of Chunyang Palace's power. Almost all the individual cultivators were interrogated one by one, and at the same time, the lives of those killers were completely dug out. Because these people were dead, many people had no scruples about speaking, and immediately countless evil deeds of these people, who bullied people and took advantage of women, were revealed. But what everyone was most interested in was the way these people died. An outer mountain disciple of Chunyang Palace, who was at the 1st level of Qi refining, killed 4 of them, 3 at the 7th level of Qi refining, and 1 at the 8th level of Qi refining? How is this possible? After countless people heard the news, they all had the same thought. No one would believe that a person at the 1st level of Qi refining could kill 4 masters at the 7th or 8th level of Qi refining. Perhaps there were many geniuses who could kill opponents at a higher level when they were at a lower level, but that was only limited to 1 or 2 levels higher. For example, it was completely possible for a person at the 1st level of Qi refining to kill a person at the 2nd level of Qi refining. However, it was simply absurd to want to kill several opponents with a difference of 6 or 7 levels. Chunyang Palace must be crazy to promote this disciple. The news slowly spread and reached the ears of people from other sections. The first reaction of those people was that Chunyang Palace wanted to cultivate this disciple. When they heard that Yang Chen turned out to be an executioner in the past, many people curled their lips to express their disdain. Even if they were all cultivators and shouldn't have these distracting thoughts, they couldn't care so much. At that time, they must teach this arrogant boy a lesson. They must teach Chunyang Palace a lesson. Chapter 76. Yang Chen didn't know this, and even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Along the way, Yang Chen did not ride the paper crane again, but walked slowly like a sightseeing tour. Along the way, he enjoyed the scenery along the way, and almost all the famous mountains and rivers he passed were visited by him. Along the way, Yang Chen did not waste time, but carefully observed everything he saw. The law of man, the law of the earth, the law of heaven, the law of heaven, the law of nature. Yang Chen called what he was doing now the law of the earth, learning from the earth. In his previous life, he was only proficient in fire spells, but not proficient in other things. Although he saw a lot of experience and lessons of predecessor cultivation in the scriptures pavilion, they were all others. Some Yang Chen could understand, some did not understand. Just through observation along the way, combined with his own understanding, he could integrate those things. Things below the foundation stage, the law of the earth was enough. Not only below the foundation stage, but even below the Deshang stage, the experience of the law of the earth was enough. As for the heaven, the law of nature, that was the realm that higher levels of cultivation would pursue. Whether it was mountains, the earth, rivers, trees, flowers and plants, they were all objects of Yang Chen's careful observation. Yang Chen remembered that in his previous life, a master of the heavenly court said that one flower, one world. A grain of sand, a tender leaf, and a vast forest of mountains, there was not much difference. Yang Chen comprehended the truth of this and slowly consumed time. As for the experience of the mortal world, it was not necessary for Yang Chen, a great principal golden immortal who had been reborn. Yang Chen just needed to do it according to his own needs. Even so, when Yang Chen arrived at the floating mountain, there were still 4 or 5 days before July 20th. As soon as he entered the foot of the floating mountain, before he entered the small town-like market, Yang Chen saw the figure of Gong Sunling in a pavilion on the side of the road. Gong Sunling was still wearing a light yellow, form-fitting palace dress. The embroidery on the hem of the dress that left a deep impression on Yang Chen was still as exquisite as ever. Yang Chen knew that all of these were made by Gong Sunling herself. Even though Gong Sunling was only at the 6th layer of qi training and couldn't refine magic treasures, when Gong Sunling made the clothes for herself, she was not careless at all. Every part of the clothes was exquisite. Her slender legs and slender waist were complemented by her tailored clothes, making it even more difficult for people to look away. Gong Sunling was holding a jade slip and studying it with great concentration. The serious expression on her face showed that she was extremely focused. From Yang Chen's angle, he could only see half of her face, but that kind of quiet and elegant demeanor made Yang Chen lose his mind for a moment. Yang Chen hadn't seen many beauties, but the ones he had seen were all peerless beauties. Chang, Yi, 9 Heavens, Xian and Vi, Jinu and other female immortals, any one of them was peerless. However, these did not have much attraction to Yang Chen. When a person lives in humiliation all day long, how could he care about these things? In this life, the one that left the deepest impression on Yang Chen was his beautiful master. Other people, even the cold and elegant Xianxia, the future little beauty Sun Xianxia, did not leave any impression on Yang Chen's heart. But at this moment, Yang Chen was attracted to Gong Sunling. Maybe it was because of Gong Sunling's kind reminder in the Sutra Depository Pavilion, or maybe it was because she was immersed in studying here, but in short, Yang Chen suddenly liked looking at this beautiful face. It seemed that looking at her would make him feel at ease for a moment. After staring blankly for a while, Gong Sunling's attention finally turned from the jade slip to Yang Chen. When Yang Chen was still far away, she already knew. It was just that she was thinking about a problem, so she did not pay attention to Yang Chen. But now it was not good to be so rude. She just raised her head and revealed a faint smile, nodded slightly and said, "You're here, junior brother Yang." That smile and slight nod made Yang Chen suddenly have a strong sense of belonging to the sect. Even if Du Qian took care of him so much, Yang Chen did not feel this from him. And Gong Sunling had only said no more than 5 sentences to Yang Chen, but Yang Chen already had such a feeling. "I'm here, senior sister." Just at this moment, Yang Chen made a decision. In this life, she absolutely could not let the tragedy of her previous life repeat itself. Such a stunning genius should not and could not fall the moment she ascended. Just after making this decision, Before Yang Chen had time to speak, he saw Gong Xuanling's face change. Suddenly pointing at Yang Chen, she asked in horror, "Junior brother Yang, what's going on with your spiritual power? How can it be so messy?" It was Gong Xuanling who keenly discovered that Yang Chen's body unexpectedly had various types of spiritual power, so mixed and impure. Wasn't this the same as destroying his own cultivation? Originally, when Yang Chen was still in the Qi refining first layer, he had fire attribute spiritual power, and his other spiritual power was suppressed by the yin-yang 5 elements reverse technique, so it was not easy to be detected by others. So whether it was Chu Heng or Du Qian, or even Zhu Chintao, they did not notice it. Now that Yang Chen's yin-yang 5 elements secret art had entered the second layer of Qi refining first layer, his spiritual power had greatly increased, so it was naturally noticed by Gong Xuanling. Yang Chen had a Martian spiritual root, so naturally he was proficient in fire attribute spiritual power. Suddenly, there was another type of spiritual power in his body. How could it not worry people? Such a messy, spiritual power. Was there something wrong with Yang Chen? It's just 5 elements of spiritual power, nothing to make a fuss about. While Yang Chen's heart was warm, his face showed a smile. I just wanted to experience how to use my fire attribute spiritual power to simulate other attributes of spiritual power, so I tried to practice other attributes of cultivation methods to understand. Gong Xuanling's face instantly became extremely interesting. This junior brother Yang Chen was really surprising. He stayed in the sutra depository for more than half a year, reading all the ancient books. And he also wanted to practice the other attributes of the 5 elements of cultivation methods to understand other attributes. This idea simply made people speechless. However, since Yang Chen's current cultivation had improved greatly, at least Gong Xuanling could see that he had gone one step further than when he was in the sutra depository. There should not be any big problems for the time being. She could only remind him, "Then you have to be careful, don't neglect the essentials." "Senior sister, don't worry, I know what I am doing." Yang Chen gave Gong Xuanling a reassuring smile, and then asked, "Senior sister is here, is it because you are waiting for me?" "You are Yang Chen?" Without waiting for Gong Xuanling to answer, a stranger's voice suddenly came in from the side. The junior who claimed to be the first layer of Qi refining first layer that Chunyang Palace has vigorously cultivated and killed several killers in the 7th and 8th layer of Qi refining first layer. In the voice, there was an unusual unpleasant tone, as if he was trying to find a liar hidden in the crowd. Chapter 77. With the voice, from the direction of the floating air, several figures appeared. All of them were in the air, flying toward this side at high speed. There were men and women flying over. It seemed that no one used a practitioner weapon when flying. Obviously, they were all at least at the 6th level of Lianqi realm. Yang Chen frowned. He and senior sister apprentice had just met and talked. Where did a bunch of messy people jump out and interrupt? Looking at Gong Xuanling's expression, she was also frowning and dissatisfied. At the moment, he had a plan in his mind. "Who said that? Nonsense." Yang Chen directly retorted without thinking. "Who spread this rumor? Don't spread false information and lose your duty as a cultivator." The other side came aggressively, but they did not expect that Yang Chen would deny it. Suddenly, the leader who had just spoken fell into an awkward situation. Originally, he wanted to use this rumor to attack and ridicule Yang Chen. But Yang Chen denied it. How could he get angry? Moreover, Yang Chen's tongue was unforgiving. Not only did he deny it, but he also directly put a big hat of spreading false information. It seemed that the people who came over were a little reckless. Fellow Taoism Yang Chen of Chunyang Palace is also here. You tell me, is this fellow Taoism Yang Chen the one who killed a few killers today? The leader was a young man. As soon as they landed, they began to attack Gong Xuanling. Yang Chen himself admitted that it was nonsense, and he had no excuse to pursue it. But being counterattacked by Yang Chen made them a little angry. It was inevitable that they would ask for advice from the more senior disciples of Chunyang Palace. "This is my junior brother Yang." Gong Xuanling's face was covered with frost, and she asked bluntly, "But what does this have to do with you?" Could it be that those killers were sent by you? What are you talking about? We have no grievances with your junior brother Yang in the past. Why do you want to find killers? The leading young man did not care about Gong Sunling's question at all. He still said with a smile, besides, if there is any discord, can't we do it ourselves? It's ridiculous to ask others to do it. Unless, some people are afraid of harming their fellow disciples, so they dare not do it themselves? While speaking, he satirized the internal strife of Chunyang Palace. So, today, fellow Taoism Han is going to clean up the sect for Chunyang Palace? Although Gong Sunling was usually kind, in the face of such provocation, she still fought back very fiercely. In the face of provocation. Although Yang Chen was by her side, she was a senior sister. At this time, she should stand up for Yang Chen. I don't dare. The man surnamed Han was Han Jianda, an Outer Mountain disciple of Tianquan sect. Like Gong Sunling, he was a disciple at the 6th level of Qi refining. Today, after learning that Yang Chen was coming, he deliberately came to mock Yang Chen, but he did not expect to meet Gong Sunling. In the face of Gong Sunling, who had the same cultivation as him, Han Jianda did not dare to use the same tone as he did to Yang Chen. After saying that he didn't dare, Han Jianda immediately turned his eyes to Yang Chen and said with a smile, Junior brother Yang, since it is a rumor, shouldn't you refute it for everyone, lest it affects the reputation of Chunyang Palace? Of course. Under the astonished gaze of Gong Sunling, Yang Chen took a step forward and said with certainty, I don't know which bastard spread the rumor, and it even caused a group of boring guys to run around as if they had killed their parents and raped their wives and daughters. How can I not refute the rumor? Pointing at a monk and calling him a bald donkey in front of him was just that. If Han Jianda and the group of people he brought could bear it, they would not have heard the rumor and come to find trouble with Yang Chen. In this world, even among the cultivators, there were also a group of people who could not tolerate others having a better reputation than them. Then how does fellow Yang intend to refute the rumor? Kowtow to the people who heard the rumor? Han Jianda sneered and said bluntly. The people behind him were the same kind of people. Just now, they were provoked by Yang Chen's words, and now naturally laughed out loud. So the rumor-refuting rule of fellow Daoist Han's sect is for the person who heard the rumor to kowtow to the people who heard the rumor. Yang Chen's mouth was wide open, and he suddenly turned to Gong Sunling and said, Senior apprentice sister, on the way here, I heard a few rumors about fellow Daoist Han's sect leader. Do you want to ask fellow Daoist Han to pass on a message to their sect leader to refute the rumor? Gong Sunling only smiled and said nothing. Han Jianda's lungs were about to explode. What kind of words are these? Ask their sect leader to kowtow to apologize? You dare to insult my sect? Insult the sect leader of the Tianquan sect? Han Jianda angrily shouted at Yang Chen. Yang Chen was not afraid in the slightest. According to fellow Daoist Han, refuting the rumor is an insult to your sect, an insult to the sect leader of the Tianquan sect? Can I take it that you are insulting the palace leader of the Chunyang Palace? You! Han Jianda pointed at Yang Chen and suddenly didn't know what to say. Yang Chen had indeed said that he would ask the sect leader to refute the rumor, but he didn't say that he would ask the sect leader to kowtow to apologize. However, his previous words were clearly what he meant. However, no matter what, he couldn't accuse Yang Chen of anything, because Yang Chen's every sentence was counterattacked according to his own meaning. If he said that Yang Chen was wrong, he would be slapping himself in the face first. Then please tell us the truth, fellow Daoist Yang, so that we won't misunderstand. Han Jianda was about to say something, but was stopped by a woman behind him. After stopping Han Jianda, the woman faced Yang Chen and said to Yang Chen with a smile on her face, I don't know which bastard spread the rumor. After cursing, Yang Chen said fiercely, Don't you know that people will misunderstand if you only spread half the number? When he said that, even Gong Sunling turned her head in surprise. What do you mean by half the number? Don't tell me that Yang Chen killed more than 3 cultivators of the 7th level and one of the 8th level? Double the number? The people on the other side, including Han Jianda, were dumbfounded. It wasn't because they were shocked, because they had already been shocked. They were shocked because where did Yangchen get the courage to say such nonsense? Doesn't he know that as soon as he makes a move, no matter how much he boasted, he will be seen through? Could it be that fellow Daoist Yang meant to say that you killed 6 7th layer Qi refining cultivators and 2 8th layer Qi refining cultivators? Han Jianda finally grasped the opportunity to speak again. He asked sinisterly, I said that I have the strength of the 2nd level, not the 1st level. Yang Chen looked at the group of people on the other side as if he was looking at an idiot, and then muttered in a low voice, Damn, I finally know who spread the rumor. What the hell? Chapter 78. Although the voice of the muttering was low, but all the people present were successful in their cultivation, and all of them listened to Yang Chen's muttering. Yang Chen's last scolding words were not missing, and he could hear it clearly. After listening to Yang Chen's words, Gong Sunling smiled in her heart, and the frost on her face disappeared a little. This junior brother Yang was really not easy to deal with. Han Jianda was so angry that he was about to explode. A group of people came to slap the face of Chunyang Palace in high spirits, but now they were scolded by Yang Chen without a chance to fight back. How could he not be angry? I don't know if fellow Daoist Yang is interested in learning from each other. Han Jianda, who was so angry that he didn't care that he was at the 6th level of Qi refining and his opponent was only at the 2nd level of Qi refining. He opened his mouth and issued a challenge. Learning from each other? Yang Chen shook his head. I'm not your opponent. Forget it. Hearing Yang Chen admit defeat so easily, everyone, including Gong Sunling, was a little surprised. Why, junior brother Yang doesn't have the courage? Han Jianda almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He was ready to fight, but Yang Chen easily avoided it. It was as uncomfortable as punching the air with all his strength. He wanted to provoke, but Yang Chen directly admitted defeat. What else was there to provoke? Even if it was set out, Yang Chen was a disciple at the 2nd level of Qi refining. It was not a shameful thing to admit defeat to a guy at the 6th level of Qi refining. But the problem was that Han Jianda couldn't get over it, so he immediately spoke sarcastically. It has nothing to do with courage. Yang Chen shook his head and walked directly behind Gong Sunling. There are too many rules in learning from each other. I'm not your opponent. But if fellow Daoist Han is really interested, you might as well find a time when there are more people and try to challenge me to the death. After that, he no longer paid attention to Han Jianda and said directly to Gong Sunling, Senior sister, didn't you come to pick me up? I'm sure the elders in the sect are also waiting anxiously. Let's go over now. Gong Sunling nodded noncommittally and walked away. Yang Chen blindly followed behind him and directly arrived in front of the few people. However, the few people did not dare to stop him. They moved aside and let the two of them go. After walking a few steps, Yang Chen turned back and said, I'll be here until the end of the gathering. Fellow Daoist Han, don't be late. After taking a few more steps, Yang Chen turned around and said, Fellow Daoist Han, don't tell me you don't have the courage. The words that Han Jianda used to ridicule Yang Chen were returned to him by Yang Chen. Even if Han Jianda didn't want to issue this challenge, it was not up to him at this time. However, Yang Chen had just said that there were more people. It was clear that Han Jianda had no reason to resolve this privately. Han Jianda was also forced to the edge of the cliff. After watching Gong Sunling and Yang Chen enter the town, Han Jianda and the others looked at each other in dismay. Then, they quickly excused themselves and left to find their sect elders. Junior brother, you shouldn't have forced him like that. After Gong Sunling walked into the town, she suddenly sighed and said, Provoking an enemy for no reason, it's not worth it. I didn't provoke him, but didn't he come looking for me? Yang Chen smiled and said, In any case, he already came looking for me. It's not a bad thing to let them know the consequences. Otherwise, they will think that you are a pushover. Gong Sunling wanted to say something more. After listening to Yang Chen's words, she didn't say anything in the end. She just took Yang Chen to a branch of Xianxia Pavilion here. This was a stronghold of Chunyang Palace. They were responsible for the daily life of the disciples who came to Chunyang Palace for the annual gathering on the floating mountain. Chunyang Palace also had a Jedon Supreme Master Rush here, But it was not anyone who was familiar with Yang Chen. Yang Chen just paid a routine visit and went to the room arranged for him to rest, no longer caring about anything else. Gong Sunling was not as free and easy as Yang Chen. She just reported what had just happened. This kid, he is really stubborn. The Jiedon Supreme Master, Su Qingxin, the Hall Master of Foreign Affairs of Chunyang Palace, saw further than others. Using a narrow-minded guy can make everyone no longer doubt Chunyang Palace. Good move. As long as he wins this round, I will accept the rest. Our Chunyang Palace has not had such an interesting kid for a long time. Hearing Su Qingxin's words, Gong Sunling was also relieved. But she still felt a little uneasy. If Han Jianda insisted on a life-and-death challenge, how would Yang Chen accept it? She could only hope that Yang Chen really had a trump card in his hands when he killed those killers. Han Jianda hurriedly returned to the Tianquan sect's encampment and hurriedly reported what had just happened to his own sect's elders. The person in charge of the Tianquan sect here was also a Hall Master of Foreign Affairs, a Jiedon Supreme Master. In front of his own Hall Master, Han Jianda did not hide anything. He knew that even if he slightly lied, the Hall Master could judge from his extremely subtle lying performance. He did not dare to lie at all. Do you have a grudge against Chunyang Palace? After listening, the Hall Master of Foreign Affairs frowned and asked in a low voice. Han Jianda hurriedly replied. What a joke! He was just an outer sect disciple. Why would he have a grudge against Chunyang Palace? Even if Chunyang Palace was a small sect, there were still a few Yuan-ing masters in charge. He was not arrogant enough to challenge Chunyang Palace. Then do you have a grudge against Yang Chen? The Hall Master of Foreign Affairs frowned again and asked again. No. Han Jianda did not dare to hide and shook his head again. You have no enmity with the pure Yang Palace, and you have no enmity with that Yang Chen. You just heard some rumors that people killed a few high-level killers, and you went to find trouble with them? The Foreign Affairs Hall Master couldn't help but ask this sentence. His tone showed that he was extremely dissatisfied. Disciple, disciple. Han Jianda did not know what to say. He could only mumble a few words, but could not say anything else. A level 6 Qi refining stage challenging a level 2 Qi refining stage. You really dare to do what you said. You only dared to compare notes with each other. You don't even dare to challenge me to a life and death challenge. You really make our Tianquan sect proud. The Hall Master of Foreign Affairs did not know what to say to Han Jianda. Is it glorious to win against you? Or is there any benefit to losing? Have you never used your brain to think about it? Han Jianda's face turned pale. Only now did he realize how stupid his previous actions were. Even if Yang Chen could not defeat him, Chunyang Palace could easily let go of the rumor. But he himself would be hated by everyone in Chunyang Palace. Why did he have to be so blinded and insist on doing this? He has already challenged you to a life and death challenge. If you don't dare to accept, then admit defeat and go back to the mountain for 10 years. The Hall Master of Foreign Affairs ordered casually. If you dare, go and challenge him tomorrow. Don't bring shame to our Tianquan sect. Chapter 79. Before the drama of the floating mountain gathering began, there was a small interlude. Han Jianda, an outer disciple of the Tianquan sect, issued a life-and-death challenge to Yang Chen, an outer disciple of the Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen accepted the challenge immediately. The two agreed on a time to have a life-and-death battle in an open space outside the town. A life-and-death battle between two outer disciples of two sects was the most straightforward way to resolve the enmity between two parties. No matter what the result was, both parties had to let go of all their previous grievances. Of course, since it was a life-and-death battle, most of the time, it would end with the death of one party. Since the person was already dead, what grievances could there be that couldn't be put down? There was a great disparity in strength between the two parties. One was at the 6th level of Qi training, the other was at the 2nd level of Qi training. However, this was also the origin of this life-and-death battle. Although Han Jianda already had some regrets, he couldn't be a coward and not dare to challenge Yang Chen to a duel. The main characters hadn't shown up yet, but there were already many people gathered around the agreed-upon open space. Most of them were disciples below the foundation establishment stage, and they were the main figures who came to participate in the floating mountain gathering. As for those experts above the foundation establishment stage, was it worth it for them to specially come and watch a fight between two juniors in the Qi training stage? Han Jianda didn't come late, but he was a little earlier than Yang Qin. When he appeared, not a single person from the Chunyang Palace appeared. Han Jianda didn't want to be distracted at this time, so he simply found a place to meditate and wait while he calmed his mind. After waiting for a long time, no one from the Chunyang Palace came. Gradually, some rumors began to spread among the crowd. What's going on? Are the people from the Chunyang Palace scared? Strange, didn't they say that there would be a life-and-death battle? Why hasn't anyone arrived yet? That's smart. A second-level Qi training stage against a sixth-level Qi training. Isn't that just courting death? Not necessarily. It said that the disciple named Yang Qin from Chunyang Palace has already killed 3 killers in the 7th layer of Qi refining realm and 1 killer in the 8th layer of Qi refining realm. It's a piece of cake for him to challenge a cultivator in the 6th layer of Qi refining realm. How do you know it's true? Maybe it was deliberately spread by Chunyang Palace to promote this disciple, just to raise his status. Whether it's true or false, fellow Daoist Han, won't you find out once you fight him? What is the Tianquan sect doing this time? A 6th layer Qi practitioner challenging a 2nd layer Qi practitioner, wasn't this bullying? I've never heard of any conflict between the Tianquan sect and the Chunyang Palace. I heard that a disciple of the Tianquan sect initiated the challenge. It was said that when fellow Daoist Han said that he wanted to compete with him, fellow Daoist Yang of Chunyang Palace directly admitted defeat and said that he was no match for fellow Daoist Han. If it was a life-and-death battle, he might be able to fight. Fellow Daoist Han also has no choice. He's been accused of bullying the weak for no reason. If he wins, it'll be fine, but if he loses, he'll probably lose his life and his reputation will be ruined. There were all kinds of discussions. Some stood on the side of the Tianquan sect, while others stood on the side of the Chunyang Palace. Everyone had their own opinions. Fortunately, the Floating Mountain Assembly was considered a major event in the cultivation world. There were many sects participating, but they still maintained a harmonious atmosphere. Everyone was just discussing, but no one made any extreme moves or words. Of course, Han Jianda also heard these discussions. However, the more peaceful the discussions were, the more depressed Han Jianda became. It was not false at all to stand up for others. This time, it was because of this reason that he had been forced into this situation. If he had another chance, he definitely wouldn't go looking for trouble with Yang Qin. Han Jianda was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He couldn't help but reach out to hold the talisman treasure given to him by the Hall Master of the External Affairs Division. It was a bracelet personally refined by a Golden Core Grandmaster. As long as he channeled enough spiritual energy, he could launch a devastating attack. Anyone below the foundation establishment stage would at least lose half their life if they didn't die. His opponent, Yang Qin, was only at the 2nd level of the Qi training stage. If he was hit, he would definitely die. Unfortunately, this bracelet was refined by the Hall Master of the External Affairs Division for a female disciple. Han Jianda could only hide it in his Qianquan bag. Otherwise, he could naturally wear it on his wrist, and it would be impossible to guard against it. With this, he could definitely kill Yang Qin. However, Han Jianda was most worried about the enmity between him and the Chunyang Palace. However, compared to his own life, the troubles in the future should be solved later. At least for now, he had to live. Thinking of this, Han Jianda slowly calmed his mind, and a confident look appeared on his face. In the eyes of others, they naturally knew what was going on. They also sighed for Yang Qin, who hadn't shown up yet. It was a pity that those who were brought to the Floating Mountain Assembly by the sect were all disciples favored by the sect. Unexpectedly, they were going to die in a life-and-death challenge. Yang Qin came at the right time. A moment before the agreed time, he and Gong Sunling appeared at the venue. Gong Sunling looked like she was going to watch the show and had no intention of helping at all. In fact, it was impossible for her to help. If someone broke the rules in a life and death challenge between two people, it would be a public provocation to everyone present. I thought you were afraid of death and didn't dare to come. Han Jianda stood up and smiled coldly at Yang Chen. With a big killing weapon in his hand, he had no fear. We agreed on this hour. It's fine as long as there's no delay. Yang Chen responded faintly, and then turned to the arbitrator on the side. Can we start? The arbitrator was a disciple in the foundation establishment stage of another sect. In a life and death duel, the arbitrator only needed to ensure that no one was secretly helping either side. There were no other rules. Hearing Yang Chen's question, the arbitrator looked at Han Jianda, and Han Jianda nodded slightly. The arbitrator did not immediately announce the start of the duel. Instead, he asked the two of them, a life and death duel will only end when one dies. Before the duel, do you two have anything to say? Han Jianda shook his head. Anyway, the one who would die would not be him, so what was the point of saying so much nonsense? What about you? The arbitrator turned to Yang Chen. Every grievance has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Fellow Daoist Han, I have no enmity with you in the past, but you took the initiative to propose a life and death duel. On the road to hell, don't blame others. Go in peace. Yang Chen said expressionlessly, and then he did not speak again. The arbitrator looked left and right, and calmly waved his hand. Start. Then he quickly retreated and left the circle between the two of them. Han Jianda had a sinister smile on his face. He did not intend to use his big killing weapon at the beginning. At least before Yang Chen died, he wanted to properly humiliate him in response to the humiliation he had just said. Before Han Jianda could do anything else, his vision blurred. In his shock, his throat tightened, and his whole body seemed to be frozen. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.